Hello and welcome to our weekly Parshas Shiur with the commentary of the Alshich. As usual, if you'd like to sponsor this year to commemorate somebody who's passed away or to celebrate a simcha, then please send me an email, as usual, to my email address, yy@rabbiyyy.com, yy@rabbiyyy.com, and I'll be very happy to do exactly that thing. This week's Parsha is the Parsha Behalosecho. The Alshich is going to take us into Kabbalistic territory here. Very intriguing stuff, nevertheless. To understand Rashi, to understand the Alshich, we'll have to visit Rashi first, and the Ramban, and a more contemporary Rabbi, Reb Simcha Zissel, the founder of the Yeshiva of Kel. And then we'll leap into the Alshich. So that's where we're going to go to this week in our Alshich Shiur. I think I'd better start by sharing the page as we do normally, and you can quickly take a screenshot, or if you're watching this not in the car, you can pause and have a think to yourself as you look at the words, what the Alshich's questions might be in the first couple of sugim, which is all we're really going to have time to look at. So I hope you enjoy that bit. It seems to have evolved into Spot the Alshich when you get to become a Torah detective every week, as undoubtedly, I suppose, he was too. So if I share the screen for a few seconds and press the share button, then there's the big pause where I always get very nervous and nothing seems to happen. Reduce that, and you should be seeing, if I move this down, there you go. That's your moment to take the screenshot, but let's read it, so let's make sure we're on the same page, no pun intended. So Hashem speaks to Moshe and he says, Daber al Aaron achicha, Daber al Aaron, speak to Aaron. Well, he was his brother, I don't know why I put that in though. Daber al Aaron, but Omarta ilav, and say to him, Behalosecho is an eris, when you light, what did they say here? Well, you kindle, all right, kindle if you like. Behalosecho is haneris, el mul pnei menorah, opposite the menorah. Yaira, you should light Shivas Neris, the 7 branches. And then the next pasuk says, V'yaskin Aaron. Aaron did so, el mul pnei menorah, opposite the menorah, which you just mentioned before. Hey, Elon, he kindled the lights, as Moshe, as Hashem had commanded Moshe. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and read to you what Rashi says and see if we can start to establish the groundwork before we go into take the perspective of the Alshich HaKodesh. So I have my little art scroll chumash here, and we can. So with regards to Rashi, what he has to say, let's see if we can make some progress. So if we just get rid of my little extract from the chumash I had from before. Behalosecho. So the translation we had was when you ignite, when you kindle, that was the word, yeah. Says Rashi, Laman is Bechel Parshas the Menorah of Parshas in the sea. Why is the Parsha of the Menorah, which of course is what Behalosecho is all about, why does that follow on from the story of the gifts which the princes of the various tribes donated for the Mishkan, which of course is the end of Parshas Nasa, and you probably know that we didn't cover it last week, that each tribe brought precisely and exactly the same gift. So no, there shouldn't be one upmanship, there should be no jealousy. So they tried to do more, which might diminish the offering of somebody who couldn't afford or to give very much. So each of the heads of the tribes gave the exact same gift. And it's just a whole story in its own right. However, even though that's extraordinarily noble and wonderful, there was one negative aspect, at least one negative aspect that was perceived as a consequence of the gifts of the princes of the various tribes, and that was, says Rashi, Lama Nismach Parshas in Menorah and Parshas in the sea. Why is the Parsha of Menorah following on from the gifts of the princes? L'tisha Kishara Aaron, when Aaron saw Chanukah's Hanasim, the dedication. Chanukah, of course, means to dedicate. As in the Hanukkah story, when they rededicated the temple after it had been defiled by the Greeks. So for Chanukah's Hanasim, Cholsha as Datai. And Aaron got very distressed. Why? Shaloh hoya imohem bechanukah lahu v'lo shiftei. That neither he individually nor his tribe, Shevet Levi, were invited to bring a gift for the dedication of the Mishkan. Everybody else brought luxurious gifts, luxurious is the right word, generous gifts. But Shevet Levi was not requested or required to do so. Homer LaKadosh Baruch Hu, so Hashem said, Chayecho, I make you a nose. Shalchol Gadol Mishalhem. What you do, what you give, is greater than theirs. Sha'ata Madlik Komiti Vesaneres. Because you've got a job to do which is greater than their job. You will light the menorah. That's going to be the compensation which Aaron is going to have to assuage his distress in not being able to contribute, now that here is tribe, to the Mishkan. Yes, you are contributing, in other words, Rashi says, and that's why the two parshas come together. It's the menorah. That will be your contribution. That's Rashi. We'll see why that's problematic in the eyes of the Ramban, and also, I suppose, in the Alshich's eyes in a second. Behalosecho, and then the word Behalosecho. Rashi is going to contemplate that word. Behalosecho in its own right is a word which doesn't make any sense, or doesn't make sufficient sense, because I'm twiddling here in case you're wondering what I'm trying to do. Since I got this new iPhone, I haven't a clue how it works. I'm trying to switch it off. Yes, because somebody's ringing me. Good. Somebody from the UK. You might be watching this. I hope they're not phoning me up to tell me that I made a mistake, but never mind. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, what does Behalosecho mean? So let's see what Rashi says. Al Shem Shalahav Oila. The Alshich is going to put it like this. It should say when you have madlik, the Hebrew word for igniting a light is madlik. Behalosecho, same word as aliyah. When you make it to go high, Al Shem Shalahav Oila, because you were required. Aaron was required to make the light, the flame, rise up. When you're lighting it, you'll make it go up, and it's an expression of going up. He says. The task that was required of Aaron, that you're supposed to kindle the light to the point where it becomes independent and will burn independently, so the flame dances heavenward. Okay, Rashi says, and there's an extra quality to the menorah because the Kohen, he does that. Right, it's entirely his job, in other words. I'll come back to that Rashi in a second. And so it says you have to light the menorah opposite the menorah. What does that mean? What it means, because when you light it opposite the menorah, if you can see my bookshelves here, so I've got my back to it already, but this corner over here, if I was facing it, then that's opposite me. Right? It's opposite me over here. So what does that mean? I light the menorah when I was over there, if the menorah is over here. That doesn't make sense. So Rashi says it refers to the wicks. So that the 7 branches of the menorah, with one in the middle, I'm going to do this, yeah, something like that, right? So that the wicks in these 3 would be pointed in Manu opposite the central candle. That's what Rashi's explanation is. So far, so good. Now this is the Ramban. So we have to turn to the Ramban, and I have to open another book because the art scroll does not have, only has the Rashi, but the commentary of the Ramban, which is the second critical commentary on the Chumash, I think, after Unkos. And he says the following thing. And this is one of the most famous things, commentaries of the Ramban. He quotes the Rashi, as he often does when he analyzes the Pasuk, quotes what Rashi has to say, and almost always disagrees. That's not that he thinks there's anything wrong with Rashi, he just has got a different perspective. Of course, we've got the general Jewish rule, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. Relative to the perspective you have, you're going to see different aspects of the Torah. That's a critical benefit and plus that we bring to the study of Torah, our own individuality. So the approach of the Ramban, it was, of course, a Sephardi. It differs from the approach of Rashi, who was an Ashkenazi, unsurprisingly, and they have different perspectives and see things differently. So let's see what the Ramban has to say. I'll read this to you. So he's just going to quote Rashi to begin with. Why is it that there is the story of the menorah following on from the story of the Nezim? Because when Aaron saw the dedication, the gifts of the various princes of the tribes, they got upset that neither he nor his tribe were invited to participate in that dedication ceremony. Hashem says, don't worry, your task, your role will be more significant than that. The bears, which you will ignite, you will kindle, and you will attend to the nearest both in the morning and nighttime. Lashon Rashi, that's what Rashi has to say, Medrash Agada, and the Ramban concedes. But of course, Rashi's not making this up. Rashi didn't make anything up. Rashi has gathered that, harvested that from the Medrash Rabbah, which says exactly that. However, Belom is barely lama nachamu bahadlokas haneros. So the Ramban is not disagreeing with Rashi, but here he wants to pursue, which Rashi doesn't, or seems not to, why exactly that would be a satisfactory answer. Because why is it that this specific lighting of the lights, as opposed to anything else that are had to do, which the other heads of the tribes were excluded from, why should that uniquely give him comfort? I mean, his role as a Kohen is going to be something that the heads of the tribes can't do in the Mishkan. So why doesn't that give him comfort? Why should it be, they get something I don't have? He's got almost everything that they don't have when it comes to the Mishkan. I'm stopping babbling. I'll allow the Ramban to actually talk. Listen to do the talking. Why should he be comforted? Because he's given the specific role of lighting the menorah. Why isn't he comforted by the fact that he offers the spice offerings, which they don't do morning and night? The Pasuk says in Devarim, and what about the rest of the Kabbalas? There are other sacrifices that the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol can offer up that they don't get to do. Why is that a more significant role? Why Hashem say to them, don't be upset that you didn't get to bring, or your tribe, the Levim, to bring gifts for the dedication of the temple. You got a bigger role. You offer Kabbalas. And the flower offering that you have to bring. And how about the fact that only you, the Kohen Gadol, and your descendants, the Kohanim Gadolim, only you get to go into the Holy of Holies in Yom Kippur? That's much, much more significant than the gifts that the heads of the tribes gave for them for the dedication of the Mishkan. Okay. Because nobody can do it except you. When you go into the Holy of Holies. Only you can serve God at that level and use his name. And the whole of your tribe are the elite tribe, if you want. They are the Am Hanifka, the chosen people of the chosen people. So therefore, what's your distress about? And your tribe as well. Boy, Matam, Machalisha has that. So why is it? So his contribution is greater than theirs. He says more along those lines, but I'm going to skip. So he says, he brings other proofs. Indeed, that seems to be the approach. This is going to give him a unique comfort, and he was distressed indeed, but he wants the offering of the work that he has to do in the menorah is going to give him complete relief from that distress. Why? Became the Medrash Rabbah, but I've seen in the Medrash Rabbah, Omar Loikadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Lech Omar Aaron, go and speak to Aaron. Altir, don't be upset. A much greater contribution you're going to make than they've made. And what is that? Sacrifices only apply as long as there's a Beis HaMikdash, a Mishkan or a Beis HaMikdash extant in existence. But not afterwards. But the other lights, the other kindling of the lights, which will last forever, but that other Hanukkah, the other menorah that is going to be lit in the schus or through your children, the Kohanim, the Hanukkah story, in other words, is much greater than them. Aha! So according to the Ramban, it's going to say that that's what Moshe's got to say to Aaron. Seeing his distress, saying that, no, you've got a bigger role than they have. And that role is that you and your children are going to make sure that the menorah is going to be lit forever. Not the menorah of the Mishkan, because that's going to go to Titus's arch in Rome, and you can see it being carried away by the Romans after the destruction of the temple. No temple, no menorah, no role for the Kohanim. But there's another role for the Kohanim. So that was, of course, the Hanukkah story, the descendants of Aaron, their critical part in that. So that goes on forever. That's why he should be comforted. Interesting. So, according to Rashi, it was merely the lighting of the menorah that would comfort him. The Ramban says, well, that's problematic, because what about all the other things they had to do uniquely, which would trump the gifts of the Nisim, the princes of the other tribes? Why didn't that comfort him? And his answer is that it was a specific gift being given to Aaron and his children that would last forever. And that's Hanukkah. That's the Hanukkah story, the Hanukkah menorah. Interesting. But before we turn to the Alshich, let me continue our pursuit of what Rashi has to say. So I'm going to take my little art scroll out again. It's only little, because it is little, incidentally. I'm not trying to belittle, to minimize the contribution of the art scroll, which is fabulous. Anyway, so he says, I don't know if you can see, by the way, you can see that in the bottom of my shelves there, those I bought myself, that's the complete art scroll, Hebrew translation of Talmud. I treated myself to that. It cost a lot of money, and I think it's worth every penny. It makes even the most difficult pieces of Talmud accessible to anybody. Anyway, fabulous. Anyway, let's go back to our Rashi here. Because the next bit of the Pasuk says, the Pasuk came over, Yaskin Aaron did so. So he was commanded to do it, and Aaron did so. Just like Moshe told him, Yaskin Aaron el Mobanim menorah. And again, it emphasizes opposite the menorah, which Rashi means that the outer little candles, the wicks pointed into the middle. Then El Mobanim menorah, he lit up the lights. Kashatzi Hashem as Moshe. Hashem commanded Moshe. But listen to the Rashi here, because this is perplexing. Rashi says, V'yaskin Aaron. Lahagid shlocha shel Aaron, this tells you the greatness of Aaron, Shaloshina, that he didn't change the commandment. So says Rashi. And there's room to be perplexed by Rashi, and then there's plenty of room there. What do you mean? And but many of the commentators say that's the only thing you can say about Aaron. This was his greatness, the fact that he didn't change what God had told Moses to tell him to do. We have names in Hebrew for somebody who changes what God tells you to do. And they're not very flattering names, right? Apicorus, mean, English heretic, all that sort of thing. And so why on earth should this be the greatness of Aaron that he didn't change it? How about the fact that he was the number 2 to Moshe Rabbeinu? That only 3 people in Jewish history died by the kiss of God, and they were all siblings, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. In the case of Moshe and Aaron, it says it specifically, it doesn't say it specifically with regards to Miriam, because of course it doesn't sound right that Hashem kissed on the lips a woman, but it says it with regards to Moshe and Aaron. There's no inappropriate association that would be made. But remember, the soul that was blown by Hashem into Adam, the first human being, was through his mouth. There was a kiss on the lips, and the soul, the living soul, was passed, as it were, whatever all this means, but that's the analogy that's drawn into his body. When at the highest level, when the soul is taken back again, is exactly that. It's a reversal. It's sucked out again. It's a kiss on the lips. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. So how about the fact that Aaron was number 2 to Moshe? Great prophet. Hashem speaks to him several times uniquely in the Torah, and not through Moshe. He was the Roid of Shalom. He was the person who made peace amongst Klal and Strong. He was the person who saved, installed a sufficient amount of time for Moshe to return when they were making the golden calf and save Klal and Strong. There is many things you could say about Aaron, but the fact that he didn't change what God told him to do about lighting the menorah, which is no big deal after all. Imagine saying, Robert Owens is so incredible. Wow, what a fellow that is. You know what he puts on the filament? He doesn't start with the box on his wrist and then wrap it up the arm. No, he does it the other way about. With the box on the arm and wraps it down to the hand. Isn't he great? What a tzaddik. Makes no sense whatsoever. So here I'm going to take you to one of my great heroes, Simcha Zissel, the founder of Shiur where Rabbi Dessler's family learned, and Rabbi Dessler learned himself. He was the teacher of Rabbi Yerucham, Mashgiach of Mir, he was the teacher of Shlomo Wolbe, Myra Shiva, Rabbi Gurevitz, and many, many others. He was the Mashgiach in Radin Yeshiva, and then, of course, as I said before, in the Mir. And but his teacher, Simcha Zissel, he says a tremendously interesting thing. He says, what would you say, as I said, about somebody who changes the halachas that God did? Is that all that you could say to talk about Aaron? But Ian Hukach, however, obviously, there's something going on here. That's not much a compliment. But why is it a compliment? Ian Hukach, the Pasuk says, when Hashem saw the world and it was good, then of light he created for the world was good. I don't know which is better, the actions of Rishoyim or Tzaddikim. So here's a Medrash Rabbah. When it says, and Hashem saw the light and it was good, the light refers to the light which is generated by human beings in the mitzvahs they do. And Hashem wasn't sure whether the light generated by Rishoyim doing mitzvahs or Tzaddikim doing mitzvahs, which one was brighter, which one was greater. A very mysterious and enigmatic statement by the rabbis. Let's read on. To me, the pasuk concludes, that pasuk indicates that it was he came to the conclusion it was the words and the work and the behavior of tzaddikim doing mitzvahs which are better than the behavior of rishoyim doing mitzvahs. Let me read this. The year medrash kachel. So this is what Simcha Zissel says. Rishoyim gamkein mevakshim mitzvahs. Here's a very interesting piece of information. Rishoyim also want to do mitzvahs. Don't think that Rishoyim are people who are just debauch, drugs, and all the rest of the stuff, all the bad stuff, angry, jealous, etc. No, a Rasha can also occasionally do good stuff. And the Rambam talks about this in the halachas of tshuva, etc. You are, who constitutes a Rasha, who constitutes a tzaddik, and in between. A tzaddik is somebody who the majority of his behavior is good, his deeds are good. A Rasha is the majority of his behavior is bad, and somebody in between is in between, 50-50. But there you are. Even the halakha says that a Rasha is somebody who still does good things. But Representative Zissel was going to take us, make that point a little bit clearer. Is there Rishoyim gamkein mevakshim mitzvahs? Rishoyim also want to do mitzvahs. Avol dafka gedolos v'nezgovos. But the sort of mitzvah they want to do is the litmus test, which will, as it were, reveal the fact that they are ultimately Rishoyim. They want to do mitzvahs which are big, which are, wow, he did that? Wow, that's incredible. Why? Because people are going to say, wow, he did that. It's all about them, in other words. They need the big mitzvah to feed the big ego. I once saw many years ago, I can't remember where I saw this. It was from Lubavitch, from Lubavitch Chosi, not one of the Lubavitch Rebbe's. And I honestly have forgotten who it was. And if anybody can email me and let me know, I'd be very grateful. But somebody said something which is very, very brilliant. He said that the Medrash says that when we say Rishoyim want to do mitzvahs, and they're big mitzvahs, there is a Medrash which says that that Esau and his descendants, there is a comparison between a mitzvah which is compared to salt and compared to straw. Now the Medrash says that salt is the king of all foods. So it preserves all foods. And straw is not only to preserve food, but salt, it also gives flavor to all foods. So the king of all foods. But straw is Michael Behema. It's the lowest of all foods. So this, Lubavitch said that when Esau was fooling his father into thinking he was a great tzaddik, he was also fooling himself. He did want to do mitzvahs. But what sort of mitzvahs? As we said here, the big mitzvahs. And he said to his father, how do you meiser? How do you tithe straw? And how do you tithe salt? Now, it didn't mean just to tithe it. To tithe something is to elevate it, to give it a degree of kedusha, of holiness. I'll come back to that in a second when we get to the Alshich. And he meant that. But the straw and the salt being the king of all foods, the zenith, and the nadir, the lowest would be the straw. He was using that as a metaphor for human beings. How do you take Jews, like the Taimoni Jews, who sadly were intentionally robbed by secular Israeli government officials of their Jewish identity when they came to Israel? The famous picture of the government minister cutting off the payas on the deck of the ship of the little Taimoni boys, and then sent to places where they would lose their Jewish identity, which was very successful. Eventually, now in, I think it was La Tikva, well, many years ago at least, it was called La Tikva district of Tel Aviv, which was a major drug and prostitution center, which were the descendants of these children, robbed of the Jewish identity. Negative stuff took over. How do you take people at that, the straw, at the lowest level, and elevate them, give them kedusha, take them higher? Said Esav to Yitzchak. And he also said, how do you take salt? How do you mice the salt? How do you elevate salt? People at the very highest spiritual level. How do you take great tzaddikim and allow them to go higher? And he meant this. In deceiving his father, he was also deceiving himself. He thought it would be a good thing to do, and it certainly would be a good thing for him. Newspaper headlines. Esav goes into the Hatikva district and opens up a Kirov seminary and yeshiva for boys and girls, and reverses the moral collapse that was caused by what happened to them in their history. Or Esav sets up a kollel in Bnei Brak or Yerushalayim for the elite of the elite kollels all over the world. Wow! But as this goes on to say, but the perspective of a tzaddik is that there is no distinction between a mitzvah, what seems to us to be a great mitzvah, a little mitzvah, a nothing mitzvah, a no effort mitzvah, no financial expenditure mitzvah, like lighting al menorah. Aaron took as seriously as a mitzvah when he was making peace between warring husband and wife, warring families, warring tribes. When he was saving the Jewish people, he didn't see a distinction between the two, because the mitzvah was not about I, it was about Hashem. And that's the greatness of Aaron. So says Kabbalistic. But this is the Alshich. So now we, of course, turn to the Alshich. Here we go. So the Alshich looks at these questions, and did you spot the Alshich's questions? Let's see, I'm going to read to you just 3 or 4. There are very, very many. And then he will take us to more Kabbalistic territory. So here we go. He says, question number 1, we should consider al kefil omer daber v'amarta. So if you look at it, it says, V'daber Shem el Moshe Mar, Hashem speaks to Moshe, and he says, Daber el Aaron, v'amarta elov, and say to him. Daber, speak to him, and say to him. Why not just Daber or Amarta? 2 speakings, that's going to be important. Those who've been with me before should have spotted that. Sorry. At least 6 years of Alshich, you should have spotted that one. 2, El Omer Loshen Aliyah. And he is interested in this, make it go up. The same question that Rashi referred to when it says Behalosecho. He says it means to make the flame go up, because Rashi's explanation was you're supposed to kindle the flame to the point where it will go up itself. Now Alshich is still not satisfied, and he wants to know more about this expression of the Halosecho, which the ArtScroll translated as kindle. Gimel, Omra el Mul B'nei Menorah, opposite the menorah. Okay. You can light it opposite the menorah. Here, how can you light it over there? You get a very long wick. Huh? That's the question. I'm only going to look at 3 questions, but I said there's many, many more. So if you found more, I'm sure you found some of the Alshichs as well. So hine, another explanation. So hine darko yizborach metarosa lahastir. So I said it's Kabbalistic. So the Alshich actually gives you a whole introduction to how Kabbalah works, I suppose, in the very broadest sense. It's the way of Hashem Yisborach in this Torah to hide that which is hidden and reveal that which is revealed, which seems a bit obvious. But he means hidden, he means Kabbalistic, mystical ideas. The mystical ideas are hidden, in other words, only hinted at in the Torah, whereas ideas like reincarnation, heaven and earth, heaven and hell, sorry. There are no mention of either in the Torah. And many other mystical ideas, these are only hinted at in the Torah, not explicit. So it's the way of Hashem for the hidden stuff to remain only as a hint, but the other stuff, the open stuff, where tefillin, kosher, Shabbos, Taras Mishpacha, and all the rest of the things the Torah obliges us to do, it says explicitly. Now he says, and that's why if you look through the whole Torah, you will only find the slightest hints, and you have to know that they're hints to be able to identify the hints with a certain familiarity of Kabbalistic ideas. And then you're able to say, oh, that's what that's getting at. Well, he's going to show you. So I won't give you an example because the menorah is such an example. So let's approach this. With that introduction, let's approach what's going on here. There's not the slightest doubt. So apart from the person doing a mitzvah, right? So Hashem says, put on tefillah, I'm putting on tefillah. Hashem says, eat kosher food, I'm eating kosher food. Learn Torah, I'm learning Torah. Apart from the fact I'm just checking the box, doing what Hashem's told me to do, but apart from the fact you're checking the box, something else is happening. And the something else that's happening is that you're changing yourself, not maybe imperceptible. We talked about this just recently. You remember I gave you the analogy of somebody who's been in a diet, or he starts a diet, maybe he's in a diet for 2 months. The first day he started the diet, he weighed himself, or she weighed herself. A couple of days later, they weigh themselves again, see no change. Well, of course not. And then a couple of days later again. And you get frustrated because the change seems small, insignificant. But somebody else that's seeing you for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months goes, wow, you lost a lot of weight. It's the same when you're doing a mitzvah. It's imperceptible. But the performance of each and every mitzvah does have an impact on you and changes you to some degree. Maybe a degree that you can't perceive, but it's a real change, which is why before we do a mitzvah, we very often make a blessing. And the blessing is the universal language, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed you Hashem, Asher Kiddushanam b'mitzvah, who has made me holy by this mitzvah. Yes, I didn't notice any change. Oh, you don't have to notice any change. It's happening. It may be it is a cumulative effect. That people who see somebody who was, let's say, a Baal Tshuva, and sees them 3 years later, when they've been doing mitzvahs and learning, etc., they see the change. I'm just talking about the appearance, the outward appearance, but the inner person has changed. So a mitzvah, apart from checking the box, right? Many mitzvahs I've got to do today, check, did them all. But it's also going to have an effect on you, which will be cumulative. Not only that, says the Alshich, the thing that you use to do the mitzvah itself becomes holy by the fact it was the vehicle to allow you to gain that holiness. It was a conduit, as it were, to allow the mitzvah to flow between you and heaven. The animal skin that we write on to create a Sefer Torah. At the end of the day, it remains an animal skin. I remember in 2014, I think it was, I had the great joy, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, of spending a week in the Venice ghetto, the first ghetto in the world. The chief rabbi of Venice, a delightful man, gave me the honor, and it really was an honor, in one of the 5 synagogues that the church built for the Jews of the ghetto. I was called to the reading of the Torah, which, if I remember right, it was 500 years old. The skin, and it was still legible, so it was still kosher, but the skin, the parchment, which is animal skin, over 500 years, had become dark brown instead of the sort of like nice, almost white color that it presents when it's first processed, with the black letters standing up. You can still read it. It was quite a thing to read from the Torah and make a blessing of the Torah. It was 500 years old. Anyway, but the writing on that piece of animal skin to do the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah or a mezuzah transforms it from being a very mundane thing to being something which is imbued with holiness. The Sefer Torah, the consistent tefillin, or carving in the boxes, getting the boxes ready to contain tefillin, which is the same. And the straps, again, just pieces of leather, not when they're made into ritzuz. Can I pause for a second, just particularly men watching or listening to this? Can I point out that when you're putting on tefillin, men very often let the tefillin drag on the ground, touch the ground? No, it has holiness. Ritzuas, the straps of tefillin have holiness. They should not be dragged on the ground. put it on the table and wrap your tefillin on that way. One of my great rabbis was very distressed by that. I'm afraid me too. And everything gets holiness, including the holiness of money. Including the holiness of money. There's many stories of Hasidic rabbis who refused to take money because they were somehow aware that the money was generated, the money was gained through inappropriate, unethical means. And he knew that, or they knew that somehow and refused to take it. But when you're using money to do a mitzvah, when you're building a structure which is going to be used for a yeshiva, or for a seminary, or for a shul, it gains, those bricks and mortar gain kedusha. Well, certainly, if that's true about the inanimate, certainly you yourself, even if it's the case that your intention in doing the mitzvah was merely in order to fulfill your obligations towards Hashem. Well, that's already a very high madrega. To do a mitzvah and have in mind that I'm doing this in order to fulfill my relationship with Hashem Yisborach, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And indeed, as we said before, you'll gain kedusha from that. But let's go to the next stage. But there's something bigger than that and greater than that. But what it is that's bigger than greater is the bit which is hidden, the Kabbalistic, the mystical aspect of this, which is referred to as that the secrets part of the Torah. And that is that you have in mind in the performance of every mitzvah is yichud elyon, a connection. By doing this, I am connecting heaven and earth. Heaven and earth. This is a very well-known Kabbalistic idea, and you'll find this in the Hasidic Sorim and in Sefer Nefesh HaChaim, or Chaim Volozhin. Yes, and Rosh Salansa Sefer. You'll find these ideas as well in non-Hasidic Sorim, that man, a human being, man or woman, is made up of 4 elements. And these are given interest names of neshama, nefesh, ruach, etc. The physical, the guf. So the body comes from this world. Nefesh, neshama, ruach all come from different spiritual planes. And only by us doing mitzvahs, because only we, not angels, only we are made of all the components of everything that Hashem created, all the dimensions, then we are able to unite those and bring them together. And of course, the signature of holiness is Achdus, back to Aaron, who brought peace and unity amongst people, obviously a holy man. If you do a mitzvah and your intention is to unite the worlds, then that imbues the mitzvah with much more than just checking the box. I'm not in any way trying to show off here, but when I learned this in Nefesh HaChaim many years ago, then I got very, very excited by the idea. And it's only, and this incidentally shows us why the angels were so opposed to us being given the Torah, if you remember the various rabbinic teachings about their absolute opposition to us getting the Torah on Mount Sinai, because they knew that once we were given the Torah, then the whole of the unity of the worlds would only be through us. And when we say, when it comes to the Amidah, Kadosh, 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 and the Kedusha of the Amidah, then and only then can the angels say Kadosh, 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 which is apparently one of their primary functions, whatever exactly that means. We'll just use the headline, because we can unite the world and nobody else can. Now imagine you're doing a mitzvah with all the sincerity of getting the mitzvah right, not training your mersuas on the floor, with the intention of making yourself holy and drawing you closer to Hashem, but also with the intention of uniting worlds, uniting dimensions. Then that gives it its ultimate kedusha. But that is beyond most of our abilities to think, but not beyond the abilities of Aaron to think when he's performing the mitzvah. So let me read a little bit more. But that's what Hashem is saying when you make the flame go up. It doesn't mean the flame just to physically dance up. The flame here will light up the flame there. And when it says opposite the menorah, I've been showing you an example of something like the wall over there. There's where the menorah is. Well, you can't see it, but there's a wall over there, trust me. And let's imagine the wall's there. How am I supposed to reach that? It doesn't mean you will light the menorah opposite the menorah that way. It means that way. There's a menorah here and a menorah up there. There's a heavenly Beis Din. There's an earthly Beis Din. There's an earthly Beis Hamikdash with an earthly menorah. There is a mirror image. Exactly what that means. too much to go into in one session, but you get the idea that what we do down here unites the menorah in heaven as well, opposite the menorah. If Aaron has in mind to put in the right kavanas, the right idea, then that is going to achieve not just the ignition and the lighting of the menorah here, but the joining of the worlds and the lighting of the menorah upstairs as well. I'll be a little bit more to you. It's not just you're doing the mitzvah and all that's entailed in it by lighting the menorah, but you're joining the worlds, by having a Kabbalistic perspective. If you want to say Hasidic perspective, I won't argue with that either. But at the highest levels, at the higher levels, you're aware, you're sensitive to the fact that you're impacting other worlds and uniting other worlds as well. Opposite the menorah, that doesn't mean opposite horizontally, vertically. Just like there's a menorah with 7 branches in the Mishkan and in the Beis Hamikdash, which is here on earth. And similarly, in the spiritual way of a Mishkan or aliens, there is one which is up there because the one down here is merely a reflection or a copy of the one up there. But you're therefore joining heaven and earth. In other words, holiness, godliness moves from up there to down here in this world. And a Jew who has that in mind to try to achieve that does achieve that. So much more is going to be achieved here. Okay, see if we can jump over page 2. Okay, Behine. He says, Derech hayichud hazeh, that basic idea is being expressed with regards to Aaron. One of our questions was, why say Daber el Aaron v'amarta elov? Daber the Aaron, we said, speak to him and say to him. It's what the Alshich said before, that there is the part of the Torah which is open and available to everybody, and the part of the Torah which is far more sophisticated, far more spiritual, mystical. That's what Hashem is telling to speak to Aaron. Tell him what to do down here, which is the basic physical thing, and also get him sensitive to the fact that he'll also be uniting worlds. So let me read a little bit more to you. There's not the slightest doubt that the mystical aspect, what we've just been discussing, that you're able to unite worlds, ignite worlds, was also being taught by Moshe to Aaron. But as we said before, the Pasuk is not going to say that explicitly. It doesn't talk mystical and Kabbalistic ideas explicitly. It's implicit. And what's the implicit nature of this? It's only a hint. Omer, that's what it says. Daber el Aaron, speak to Aaron, who Dovra built in Niskal Mahu, who Sayid Kabbanas Yichud. You've got to tell them things which is the mystical side. And after that, he says that then you'll light, when you're lighting it. But have that in mind. First of all, know that it's not just the physical act of lighting it, which will be a mitzvah for you, etc. There's something far more implicit, greater here. And that is to say, that you're lighting something up here as well. So Rashi says the reason that the story of the menorah comes after the story of the princess is to give Aaron comfort with the fact that he wasn't part of that. Oh, you've got a bigger role to do lighting the menorah. Why would that comfort him? He still didn't get to bring his gift. And Ramban's approach was, but there's so much else that he did, including the avodah of Yom Kippur, the role of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, which nobody else does. So why was this unique? The Ramban says it's because it's talking about something that's going to happen in the future. That's the Hanukkah story. But the Alshich says no. The Alshich says no, that specific instruction now, in this time, in Aaron's time, is going to be an enormous comfort to him in pointing out that you, and only you, by lighting this menorah, can light the menorah in heaven as well. That you, in your work in the Beis Hamikdash, you're uniting and allowing that same parallel, whatever that means in the highest spiritual levels, to occur there. But certainly you're uniting worlds. And that's a unique role. And that's going to give Aaron comfort. It's also, even though it's a little bit perhaps above our normal radar detection is something I think we should be aware of. It's also, at a very mundane level, always a great incentive for me to make sure I'm in shul in the morning, and in the afternoon and the evening, to daven with a minyan, because only then, when I answer Kadosh, 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 I play my part in allowing the angels up there to say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. It's only then I'm playing my part in uniting, or trying to unite the worlds, which is only possible when you actually have that consciously in mind. So the responsibility we have is, first of all, to yourself, and then, of course, to your family, and then, of course, to the whole of the Jewish people, and after that, to the whole of the world. But the Alshich just explains something a little bit more exciting, and to the worlds. Not just your responsibility to the world, but to the worlds too. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Again, if anybody would like to sponsor the Shiur, we did 2 weeks in a row. It's YY at rabbiYY.com. I wish you all a very, very good Shabbos.